Hello, and welcome to the Mr. 50mm YouTube channel. I am sad to say that I've nearly completed the set. I have almost all the Infinity Stones. No, that ain't it. I have almost all the 5D series cameras. Almost. I just don't have the base 5DS camera. As you know, I have the 5DSR. I also know you haven't seen the review of the 5D Mark III. And that's because I haven't done these reviews in order, but I do promise I have a 5D3. Another thing that I just wanted to point out before we get started, if you weren't aware, just because I remembered the 5D3, Magic Lantern is back. And yeah, it's exciting. They've reorganized and they're releasing new firmwares. So you could probably guess that the 5D3 video that I'm planning is going to be a little Magic Lantern focused. But that's a video for another day. For now, we're going to have a look at this camera here, the last of the line, the Canon 5D Mark IV. Let's get started on the final chapter of the 5D series of cameras. What is the Canon 5D Mark IV? I'm going to start calling it just the 5D4 to keep things short. The Canon 5D4 was released in September of 2016. It is a full-frame Canon DSLR, of course of the Canon EF mount. It features a 30.4 megapixel Canon-made CMOS sensor. The ISO range of this camera is between 100 and 32,000, with expansion allowing it to go from 50 to 102,400 ISO. It features Canon's ubiquitous dual-pixel autofocus, and the 5D Mark IV is equipped with the Digic 6 Plus image processor. Shutter on this camera is good from 30 seconds to 1/8,000th of a second, and flash sync is 1/200th of a second. The metering on this camera is handled by a 150,000 pixel sensor. The body is fashioned from magnesium alloy, and it has weather sealing as expected from a 5D series camera. The 5D4 also has Wi-Fi on board, since it's also pretty modern. Autofocus on this camera is done with a AF module lifted from the 1DX Mark II. So it features 61 points, with 41 of those being cross points, and 5 of those being double cross points, or dual cross points, oriented vertically down the center. This camera is also capable of shooting at a solid 7 frames per second for around 28 RAWs on a fast enough card. Speaking of which, the 5D4 features both a CF card slot as well as an SD card slot, UH1 enabled. The rear panel of this camera is a 3.2-inch fixed display with 1.62 millidots, and it is a touchy unit. The camera does indeed shoot video. It is modern after all. It shoots DCI 4K up to 30p. That is, of course, with a 1.64 times crop. And it also uses the Motion JPEG codec, which is a choice. 1080p is uncropped, and dual pixel autofocus works in all of video modes. The battery on this camera, or in this camera, should I say, is the LPE6N, and it is compatible with the regular E6 batteries, offering up to 900 CP rated shots. The 5D4 weighs in at 890 grams with a battery. That's around 0.445 knocked. MSRP back in the olden days of 2016 was $3,499 USD, or $4,710 in 2025, or roughly 6,500 maple leaves dipped in maple syrup, as is the custom. shooting with the 5D4 operation and feel. If you've seen my other 5D videos, you can probably guess how this is going to go. It's about the same as the rest of the 5D line. It's well built, very well built, feels solid in hand, has a great grip, and it has very natural feeling controls, with a pretty good menu system, even if there is a bit of modern bloat. As with all the 5D series cameras, this camera has, a dual command dial layout, one behind the shutter and the big one underneath your thumb. The setup is as old as time itself, and it's damn near perfect. It also has a top LCD, which is normal for the line, and I still appreciate it. And yes, illumination is still amber, not blue. Instead of beating a dead horse and continue to talk about the 5D ergonomics that are already perfect, I want to talk about some other things, some differences of the 5D4. Let's start off with something small. There is a new button on the back of the camera. It is right here. Oh, here. It's just below the AF joystick, and it's very interesting. It's not a normal button. It kind of feels different than the other ones when pressed. And I feel like this is probably to aid in identification of the button when the camera is at eye level, so you can kind of feel it out and just know that you're hitting that button. It is neat enough. It can be mapped to a lot of different things. And the name of this button is apparently the AF area selection button. So I mapped it to that. I'm not really sure how much I'm gonna use it since I'm a single point AF kind of person, but we'll see. Maybe my issue was the lack of a button to help me rapidly change these AF areas. We'll figure that out as we shoot this camera. The next big change is in the operation of the camera, which is to say that the rear is a touchy touch display. And Canon's implementation is generally a cut above the rest. And that is true on the 5D4. Anytime that you do things on the touchscreen, it feels pretty natural. Just for an example, if we go into live view and we touch, you can effectively use it like a slider. Don't know if I actually managed to touch it from, this orientation, but okay. It does generally work pretty well when you can see the screen. Additionally, when you're doing image review, the display is also fairly natural to use. You can double click. Oh, no, sorry. Getting my cameras mixed up. You can pinch zoom and it'll pinch zoom just like on your smartphone. And if you have it enabled in live view, you can use the rear screen as a touch shutter by clicking that bottom corner. And there you go. If you can get me in focus, it'll take a photo. The next big operational change, or really an addition, is the fact that the LCD got a touch screen on the back, and it's a Canon implementation, meaning it's typically pretty good. And I think that on the 5D4, it's a very natural implementation. When you are in live view, for example, if you have something you want to change on screen, if it's flanked by a box, you can touch it, and then you can manipulate it on the screen. You can slide it. I don't know if you can see that, but I am sliding the exposure comp. It is doing it. I'm going to now set it back to where I want it. And overall, the implementation is quick. It's fairly thumb/fat finger friendly, and it's easy to tell what you can and can't manipulate. If you wanted to, you can even manipulate the entire menu system via touchscreen. This is going to be harder to do looking at my phone, looking at what my Sony is seeing, but you can go through the pages, you can manipulate options. It's pretty good. And if you are going to do image review, it's even got some smartphone-y kind of gestures. For example, in this display, I can pinch zoom and, pinch zoom and navigate the image by dragging my fingers. It's harder to do when you're not looking at the back of the screen. Trust me. When you are, it's quite easy. Overall, it's a very good touchscreen implementation. And I find that overall, it's well done, and I do actually find myself using it when I use live view or if I'm using the video mode. So kudos to you, Canon, for not sucking at touch implementation. An example that I find myself using a lot with the touchscreen is the touch to focus. Now, I don't find it that useful in photo mode since normally I'll just move the photo box with the AF joystick or whatnot. But in video mode, if I need to track something, I can just tap what I want to track and or focus on, and it'll just do it. Thanks, Dual Pixel AF. Shooting the Canon 5D for image quality and autofocus. So let's go back in time. It's 2016 when this thing comes out. The 5D SR shook things up with big resolution, but there are still concerns that Canon's lost its edge. What are they gonna do? Well, release the 5D4 is what they're gonna do. And I think this was another sign, aside from the 5DS series, that Canon were getting more serious. After all, at this point in time, Sony's sensor tech, Sony tech in general, is starting to become problematically good. And it's signaling that mirrorless cameras are here to stay. Additionally, Nikon's employment of Sony sensors on paper were killing it against Canon DSLRs. And I know, Canon had a bunch of missteps along the way with the way that they've developed. I'm looking at you, EOS R and RP. And yes, I'm aware that EOS R had a version of the 5D4 sensor. That camera had other issues. Mostly, it looked like a half-hearted attempt at doing a mirrorless camera. Anyways, back to the 5D4. You release the 5D4, and it offers a moderate boost from the norm of full-frame sensors. That is 24 megapixels. Arguably, it still offers a pretty moderate boost to the smattering of 24 megapixel full-frame sensors that are out there even to this day. At the same time, the 5D4 sensor got a considerable boost in dynamic range and noise performance compared to the 5D3. Now, it wasn't able to keep up with dynamic range and noise performance of, say, Sony's 24 megapixel sensor, but you could argue that the resolution bump was worth it, and it might convince other users that the other factors weren't as big of a deal, considering you got extra pixels. Additionally, it didn't trail that much behind the other 24 megapixel sensors, so the gap was starting to close, especially when you consider at the time when the 5D Mark III was released and the competition that was out for that camera. The 5D Mark III sensor is seemingly a larger gap in performance to the say D610 or Nikon D750. Now, I really do think that the 5D4 had a pretty good mix of capability. That 30 megapixel resolution was pretty neat at the time, and at this point, I've shot a lot of 24 megapixel cameras, so it's nice just to have another number of pixels to shoot with. Now, I never really found that I was wanting for that much more dynamic range or that much more noise performance. And sure, my A7 III and my Fujifilm GFX 50 will absolutely outspec this when it comes to dynamic range or noise performance. But again, I don't find myself intentionally shooting those scenarios where I'm going to need to pull the file or push the file multiple stops just to make the image work. Of course, that being said, I am just an internet weirdo who likes shooting cameras for fun. So maybe pay no mind if you're watching for pro advice. Now, let's look at some noise samples from the 5D4. I'm pretty happy shooting high ISOs on the 5D4, 6400 all day long, and 12800 provides a nice workable file with modern noise reduction. When it comes to autofocus, the 5D Mark IV is exceptionally solid. After all, the system is lifted from the 1DX Mark II, and that autofocus system is no slouch. It is the opposite. It's a non-slouch. It's fantastic. Basically good at most nearly everything. It's very quick, and those double cross-type sensors almost always get everything every damn time. Tracking is even pretty solid on this traditional phase detect module, and it is generally fairly sticky as long as you can keep your subject on one of the autofocus boxes. And again, yelling out 61, not the 1 trillion that you might normally have on a mirrorless system. The key is the tracking is pretty solid through the optical viewfinder. For those of you who don't know, the tracking through the finder is aided by Canon's metering system, which provides some rudimentary subject tracking. I don't know if this is actually that good, since most of the time I'm stuck in the old way of using DSLR autofocus systems, and I mostly try to keep my subject on one point. But on simpler things that I had played with this system with, where I would let the camera track an object, it seemed to work pretty well, but I don't have an enormously good amount of practical experience with it. But for what I've shot with the 5D4, I found the system, like I said, to be pretty dang good. Again, especially using those double cross type points. The 5D4 actually has an extra ace up its sleeve. You might have caught it earlier on when I was talking about the camera features. That is the dual pixel autofocus. It's not Canon's first DSLR to use that, but it is the first and the last on the 5D series to be equipped with dual pixel. For those of you who are unaware, it's Canon's on-sensor AF technology. Effectively, every pixel on the sensor is divided into left and right sides. And in doing so, they can use the info from that divide to effectively contribute every pixel to autofocus and use them as autofocus points. The result is that in live view, things are about as snappy as with the dedicated autofocus system on this camera. And coverage is better too, since dual pixel is across the entire sensor. Now, I don't remember if you can actually tell it to focus at the absolute edges. I don't believe you can, but you get a fairly wide amount of coverage on the camera in live view, certainly more than through the OVF. This tracking with dual pixel or the use of dual pixel for autofocus is good even when tracking subjects. It tends to be pretty sticky on the subject when it's acquired something. Now, I do want to state that this is early dual pixel autofocus. It's not as infallible as modern dual pixel systems, and as I said, it covers a lot of the frame, but not all of it. The outer edges are not quite covered on the 5D4. And as I said, since it's a older version of dual pixel, there are times when you can confuse the system and it'll lose its tracking. The camera does have a face tracking ability, but it doesn't have the ability to do like AI bird fart detection. But this does make it so that it's actually kind of refreshing in live view with the autofocus. There actually aren't that many settings. You got like your tracking, flexible spot, or face tracking. Not a huge amount of menu to get stuck into. All these AF chops are backed by the camera's ability to shoot 7 frames per second. Yes, I know by modern standards, that is not that quick. But remember, this is a DSLR and it's got a flappy mirror in it. Shutter as well. So let's have a look, well, a listen at some burst shooting with the 5D Mark IV. Evidently, I don't have the fastest card, so that buffer filled up right quick. But I think the 5D4 has a reasonably good shutter sound. It's not my favorite. I think the 5D Classic and 5D2 sound nicer, but it's a fairly nice sounding camera. Again, if you want a camera that's pure chunkage on that shutter, have a listen to a 1D shutter. They're always reassuringly nice. But as I said, no real problems with the sound of the 5D4. It's pretty good. Again, not the best, but pretty good, in my opinion. Video mode. The 5D4 shoots some video. In fact, it shoots some 4K video. And the 4K is DCI 4K, so cinematic wideness. That said, it is cropped in. It is not full width. It is cropped to about 1.64 times. If you want to shoot video without a crop, you're limited to 1080p recording. The nice thing is though, is that no matter what video mode that you are in, the dual pixel autofocus will work. As for quality, the 4K, to my stills-based photocentric brain, looks pretty good. Honestly, can't complain about it. I do believe though that it's not quite as detailed as my A7 III, but honestly, as I said, 4K off this camera looks pretty good. It's definitely significantly better than the 4K that came out of the EOS RP when I had that camera. The main limiting factor when it comes to video on this camera, at least for me, is the fact that it uses motion JPEG, which is horrendously inefficient. If you want to work with this camera, you need to have very fast cards and they need to be fairly big. Just to give you an example, the first clip you're going to see is a clip of me playing around with the dual pixel autofocus and just how sticky it is. It's about 1 minute long, and that whole clip is 3.5 gigabytes. That's not great for a minute of footage. For example, the A7 III using the 100 megabit 4K codec only consumes around 600 megabytes for 1 minute of footage. Before we actually get into looking at the samples though, the 5D4 makes some interesting choices when it comes to video capabilities. Now, this camera has both a mic jack and a headphone jack, and you can output to HDMI, but it lacks the ability to show you zebras or focus peaking. But you can do things like tweak the AF speed in video. What this basically tells me is that I know for sure Canon gave the 5D4 a couple solid hits with the Canon cripple hammer, which is really too bad. Let's have a look at some of those clips though. Okay, so we're on the 5D Mark IV shooting at 4K, DCI 4K. Keep in mind it's got the 1.65 or 64 times crop, and we're going to play with the autofocus tracking. So I have face detect turned on, and I also have, well, it's got dual pixel AF, so let's see if I can get my face. I'm going to step in the frame, and it should be okay. So many chins. All right, it is quite sticky. The dual pixels are dual pixeling. All right, that's all I got. Recommendation and conclusion. This is kind of tough, but let's start with price. The 5D4 on eBay and on various used camera sites still command a pretty high price. A good condition one is probably going to sit around 1,000 USD, with rougher ones being closer to 700 US dollars. That's kind of a lot of money. If you're someone who wants to stick with DSLRs rather than going to mirrorless, I think the 5D4 is an excellent camera overall. It's both a very modern feeling camera with well-spec'd features. It's honestly hard to go wrong with the 5D4, especially when you consider that the sensor delivers great images and offers more than the baseline resolution for full-frame cameras. Again, even today. That being said, the sensor in this camera is just a normal front-side illuminated sensor, no stacking, no backsideness. But here's the thing though. I think for most people who want a DSLR, they don't tend to be very spec focused. It's more about the experience that matters. That's, at least for me, why I'm pretty happy shooting things like the Kodak DCS760, Nikon D200, or these older DSLRs in general. It's the big grip, the optical viewfinder, and the predictable AF systems of old. They make the camera fun. Now, the 5D4 is all of these things. It is fairly fun, it's got a big grip, it's got an optical viewfinder, and the AF system feels like a old school phase tech system, because it is. But it is also more expensive than older cameras, and if you don't really care about the specs, the 5D3 exists, and it offers a lot of the modern touches like the nicer AF system, dual card slots, and I would say it's more photocentric than the 5D4, and it costs significantly less than the 5D4. Plus, if you wanted to dabble in raw video, the 5D3 is the camera to go with there, since the Magic Lantern support is right there. Now, if you don't care about whether or not you want to shoot on a DSLR or just want a camera, and you want to be in the Canon ecosystem, the Canon R8 also exists. It is a little more than the 5D4, but you can still drop in EF lenses with an adapter, and it honestly seems like a pretty great mirrorless camera. It seems like it's what the Canon EOS RP should have been. So who is the 5D4 really for? So if you're someone who isn't ready to jump into the mirrorless systems, but you want a modern DSLR, you want to dabble in some 4K, and critically you want to stay in Canon, this is it. But for everyone else, there's the 5D3, there's the 5D2. Be careful though, or you might end up like me, and your 5D3 may end up being a video machine for Magic Lantern. That's all I got though, and it's kind of funny. I do love the 5D4, but it's hard to recommend it given all the other options that are available, even just in the Canon ecosystem. If you're not tied to Canon, it's even harder to recommend it. There are so many nice full-frame DSLRs out there. But here's the question for you. What's the most modern DSLR that you have? And do you think it's come a long way compared to the older DSLRs? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe a super thanks if you're into that. Till next time, bye.